It seems Wall Street is quite upbeat on Apple's latest succession plan. Joining us now with his take, we've got Tom Forte, who is the Maxim Group Managing Director and Senior Consumer Analyst here. Great to have you here with us, Tom. All right, so you heard the discussion and you've seen the news. So now what for Apple, and what does this transition signal to investors out there?
Yeah, so I think the signaling to investors is that, to me, Luca's biggest accomplishment was advancing toward net cash neutrality. So what does that mean? Returning more money to shareholders via dividends and buybacks. This is something that the incoming CFO, Mr. Parekh, is going to work towards as well. The other thing that I think is interesting is, if you were to compare Mr. Maestri's tenure at Apple with Mr. Oppenheimer, his predecessor, it was much more challenging, to the extent that he had to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. And when he led Apple's financial, they did not have, the regular beat that they always had under Peter Oppenheimer. So I think Mr. Maestri had a much more challenging time when he was CFO versus his predecessor.
So what do we need to know, and what do investors in particular need to know about Kevin Parekh and the path forward for him? How prepared is he to carry the torch forward for Apple?
Yeah, so I think that Apple's got a deep bench when it comes to their financial or finance department. You saw that earlier this year when one of their executives left to be CFO of Sonos. So I'm not concerned in that regard. The other challenge, though, that Mr. Parekh inherits that Luca didn't have, at least at the beginning of his tenure, is the antitrust lawsuit. So these are challenging times for Apple on multiple fronts, from a regulatory front, including what's going on in the EU, with their laws as it pertains to the marketplaces. And then it's a much more challenging time. There's a lot of competition coming out of China. So it'll be a challenge, but I think he'll be up for it given his long tenure at Apple so far.
What do you expect the cost discipline at Apple to look like under Kevin versus Luca, as our own Josh Lipton was mentioning?
So I expect the overall strategy to remain. So Apple, for the most part, has acquired talent. Their M&A has not been very big as far as large outlays of dollars. I don't think that'll change. I think they'll continue to return a lot of money to shareholders via buybacks and dividends. I don't think that'll change. The bigger question in my mind is, when do we see a change in the C-suite at the CEO level? So how long does Tim Cook intend to stay on board? He's done an amazing job. He's the poster child for the best CEO taking over from a founder. So I'm curious to see, when that'll take place. And I think that'll have much broader implications for investors.
It would seem to me, though, that the way that the past 24 hours and the planning leading up to this succession is a key indicator for shareholders of Apple about how a succession plan for Tim Cook could potentially materialize moving forward. What do you think operationally Apple may be applying from the past succession plan for the CFO level to the CEO spot?
Yeah, so I think that essentially Apple's an institution. I believe Steve Jobs implemented Apple University as a way of, teaching things that are core to Apple's DNA to future executives. So an amazing transition from Steve Jobs to Tim Cook. I expect the next transition to also go well, likely from someone who's currently at the company. And again, Apple's an institution. They're replacing from within at the CFO level. And I expect when the day comes, they'll replace from within at the CEO level as well.
While we have you, Tom, of course, the big event that we're going to be watching come early September is really going to be focused, zeroed in around the iPhone. How much of a needle mover do you expect this to be for consumers, but also for that to pass through and translate into better revenue, better production financially for the company and for investors?
Yeah, Brad, the challenge for Apple is they're going to introduce new hardware, but tell consumers that they're going to have to wait for the new software as it pertains to Apple Intelligence. So I think this may cause investors, or consumers rather, not to run to the store on the launch of the iPhone 16. And I'll be curious to see how the sales ramp in that regard, to the extent that maybe you have more growth in the December quarter than the September quarter, because Apple's introducing new hardware, but consumers are going to have to wait for the new software to do Apple Intelligence. So I think this quarter and this product launch will be unique in that regard.
All right.
Tom Forte, thank you so much for joining us. Really great points. And also, I particularly was interested in what you said about the CEO spot coming from within moving forward. Really important for investors to keep an eye out on those other names in the C-suite, given that advisement there. Tom Forte, Maxim Group Managing Director and Senior Consumer Internet Analyst. Thanks so much.